I had a 1% chance of surviving, but I used to always think, like, someone has got to be in that 1%. Why can't it be me? Knowing what I know about pancreatic cancer, the survival rates have definitely increased. They're not nearly enough. You are a statistic of one. No one is like you. No one's like your body. Anything is possible. I'm Elise and I'm from Georgia. I was diagnosed in 2012 with stage 4 inoperable pancreatic cancer. I never imagined that I would get cancer, let alone stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And the craziest thing is, I feel like it was a gift in a very strange package. And it's crazy to even think that I would say I'm sort of thankful for going through what I went through. And maybe there's just a lot of purpose from all the pain. In early 2006, I was speaking at a company conference, and I remember being really, really nervous about it. And I was getting this crazy back pain, and not a usual place. The back pain was like sort of my one side and in the middle of my back, and I just blew it off and took Advil, and I didn't have it for a while. Then fast forward in 2012, my kids at that time were in kindergarten and second grade, and I was experiencing this back pain again, and it got worse and worse. And honestly, I remember being in Cape Cod and just being in so much pain, and went and saw a kind of a doc in the box, doc in the box, and I thought it was a kidney infection. Basically, they came up with nothing. And I went back and saw my regular doctor, who kind of blew me off at that time and said, "Oh, you've always had back problems." I'm like, "No, but this is different." And it just got worse and worse. And I think as someone that's gone through this, you know yourself the best, and you have to keep pushing. It started with back pain, and then my stomach began to hurt a lot. And then I felt like I just couldn't eat. I was losing weight. I felt like I got the worst indigestion ever possible. And I was miserable. And I think the weight loss was like a really big thing, because I wasn't really trying. Honestly, I was kind of psyched that I was losing weight, but it was not a good thing. So 9 months of being not diagnosed, I finally switched internal medicine doctors, and he immediately did a CT scan with contrast, whereas my other doctor had given me an MRI without contrast. You won't be able to see a tumor. So they had said I had a bulging disc, and I did physical therapy, and it didn't help, obviously. So once I knew that I had that tumor, then it was even more difficult for the doctors in Atlanta to figure out what was going on. So I actually had to go out of state and go to a comprehensive cancer center and get diagnosed. I had seen, in that time of 9 months of not getting diagnosed, I saw holistic doctors, I saw chiropractors, I saw um, uh, just every doctor you can imagine, even acupuncturists, pain management doctors. And the pain just got so incredibly bad. I mean, I would tell people I would rather have 100 kids without drugs, rather than this pain. It was just so consistent and so bad. And it was worse at night. And it got to the point where I really could not even sleep anymore, because the pain was just on and on and on. And so it was really frustrating. And I think when I switched doctors and he said, you have a very large tumor on or near your pancreas, even the oncologist that he referred me to wasn't really sure what it was and wanted to do exploratory surgery, which I thought, okay, if this is cancer, then that's a really bad idea. So my sister, Carrie, actually said, look, we have to go down to Tampa, um, and it's an NCI designated hospital, which means they do tons and tons of research. They're on the top of everything, and they're knowing what the latest stuff is. So we went there. We had sent everything. They had done like a needle biopsy and endoscopic biopsy in Atlanta. We had them send all those slides to Tampa, and ended up that they did tumor board, which is they get all these doctors together and they look at everything. And so I go on this meeting with there was probably like 4 doctors and a whole team. At this point, from the scans that I'd already done, they said, you have locally advanced pancreatic cancer. And I was just completely dumbfounded. I just kept thinking it was something weird I had. It was just going to go away. And they had gone on and said, look, we want to do more tests. We want to do a PET scan and a CT scan with contrast here. So after doing that, found that it was actually stage 4. So it was in my liver mostly. And then there were spots in my chest and in my lungs, which is all bad news. But the crazy thing is, I didn't hear them really say I was stage 4, because my doctor had said something like, I'm treating you like stage 3. So in my head, I was like, oh, I'm stage 3. It hasn't spread. And I didn't realize that it was stage 4 until I was in Atlanta, where an oncologist here was going to work with my doctor in Tampa. And so I could stay home and do all my chemo, because they said chemo is chemo. And I remember that doctor saying to me, oh, you know that you're really very much stage 4. And I really started freaking out. And the first thing I asked her was, do you think I'm going to die? And she said, yes, probably so. And I was just like, oh, I'm like, well, my doctor told me that he was treating me like stage 3. So call my doctor. You need to call my doctor. So she called my doctor. At that time, we did a tour around the facility to see where I was going to do all my chemo treatments and all that. And I just remember like thinking to myself, okay, God, you have to give me just a sliver of hope, because I can't do this with no hope. And so we come back in her office and she says, here's the deal. She goes, we're treating you like stage 3, which honestly meant nothing different in my treatment. But mentally, it was everything. It was everything. It allowed me to really go and say, okay, I'm going to fight. And I had pretty good reason to fight, because I had 2 little boys at home and great husband. And I always would say, I'm not leaving my boys, and no one else is marrying my husband. So, and it's almost like if you were a new mom and you had triplets, and you wouldn't know any better. So I had no idea what to expect. And I was just like, I don't care what I've got to go through. Let's just do this. Let's just make this happen. And so I'm in general a very positive person. And I think that played a huge part in it, because of course, I mean, negative thoughts all the time, fear all the time, but I had to consciously put that out of my brain. Like I literally would stomp on my feet and say, no, 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 not going there. And I would consciously have to be positive. At the time, there had only been 2 drugs on the market, and the drug that I ended up doing is actually a chemo cocktail of 4 drugs, and it had gotten FDA approved the year prior. And so my doctor was like, we're going to do this chemo. And what's amazing about it is that it is a very tough chemo, but the words he said. He had said to me, "Hey, you'll still be able to work. You will, you can will be able to manage all the side effects." Um, and then he did tell me, he goes, "And you shouldn't. Your hair will thin, but you shouldn't lose your hair." I did lose my hair, but and I'm like a hair girl, so that was hard. And so but he sort of set that tone for me. And then after that, then the radiation oncologist was there as well, and she had said, "Look, after you do these 12 rounds of chemo, we'll probably go and give you a." What they had said then was like a break from this chemo, and we'll do radiation and chemo, and that was kind of the plan so far. At first, and I thought every round was a little different. So I remember getting home from that first round and I was shaking like crazy. And then that was only the first time. I think it was such a shock to my body, I guess. I did get neuropathy, but I still worked. My doctor told me stay active. So I still lived life. And I think that is extra important because my kids had soccer games, and they had school functions and things like that, and they were also two very young boys that had came home with germs all the time. And so there were times I got whatever they got, but I would take antibiotics, I would be okay. I i can't imagine not having them around. And of course when they were sick, yeah, you think that I would stay away from them. No, I'm their mom, and I'm snuggling with them, but it is what it is. Side effects, oh, I have the big D, endlessly. And truly, they tried everything to counteract that. That was a little difficult. So they, usually pancreatic enzymes helps that, but did not help me. Um, they even gave me a patch to kind of slow down my system, which is so weird. So it kind of like just tried to slow down everything. That didn't work. They even gave me opium tincture, which was the most disgusting tasting thing ever. And yeah, that didn't work either. And so I was like, it is what it is. I did get down to 89 pounds, which 89 pounds does not look good on anyone. But I mean, I still felt like me. I still worked, which people think I was crazy. I was a little chemo brained in there, but I found that I had to write everything down, especially when I was running a meeting, cross things off, because if not, I repeated 1,000 times. I mean, there are some funny stories with chemo brain in there, but I mean, I tried to live my life as much as possible, and I think that was really, really important. It was 12 rounds, and I had gone through six. So this is a crazy thing. I've gone through six. My tumor almost shrunk in half. All my metastases. I think there were still some left, but most have really, like, some weren't even existent. I mean, it really worked very well in me, which I was so thankful for. Um, but I remember in my head of being like disappointed because I was like, it's really not done. Like, I'm really not done with this. And after that, I guess I had to do six more. And I remember crying about it, like, oh, I have to do six more. And the six more were fine. It wasn't any worse. I mean, there was one point where I did get allergic and then had split it up and everything. I went back to Tampa, and the tumor had shrunk a little more, not as much as like that the first six rounds, but they said, look, we need to give you a break from this chemo because it's pretty intense. And by the way, now when they do that same chemo, it's 20% less of the drugs. So it was pretty intense. And so then I basically had to move. I moved to Tampa, and luckily some family friends like let us have their condo for 5 weeks on the beach. That was not bad at all. It's beautiful. And I would go in every day, um, you know, to do radiation, and it was like 20 minutes. I had the best radiation team. I mean, I would say I was young. I was probably one of their younger patients per se, and so it was. So I got to know all of them really well. I mean, you're seeing them every day. So I did that with a chemo pump, and that was like I remember writing to someone like, "Oh my gosh, this is such a piece of cake compared to the big chemo I was doing." So it was one of the chemo drugs I was doing along with radiation, and it kind of made me sleepy, cumulatively sleepy. But I could actually drive myself. Chemo, no way. I've been off of everything for a month. I feel pretty amazing. And he goes, "Well, you should because you have absolutely no active cancer." So nothing lit up in my PET scan. And I recently just found, I took a picture of the screen where originally it was like the PET scan and things light up. So there's all these things lit up on the first one. And then the one, there was like nothing lit up. And it's usually you would get a false positive more than anything. Like it's more likely for things to light up than not. So I was just blown away. But I still had a tumor in there and it was still attached to that superior mesenteric artery. So a traditional Whipple is what someone would get if they can have surgery. I was still not a candidate because it was wrapped around that. So essentially they would say, "Oh, you know, likely you're not going to get clear margins. You could die on the table." And there were doctors willing to do it. And I now know there are doctors that can do it, that treat it like bypass, that are pretty amazing out there. But I ended up having what's called IRE, and people have heard about it. It stands for irreversible electroporation, and it's what it and it, or it's called nanoknife, is which the more common name of it. And it's not a knife at all. So I had to go to Louisville, and they do a big zipper cut down your belly, and they go and they take these prongs, they insert them into the tumor. It shocks all those cells in the tumor, so it pokes holes in all those cells, and then they naturally fill with calcium, and then they have cell death. So essentially it's supposed to just basically dissolve in your body. And believe it or not, that's exactly what happened for me. you I will tell you, a lot of people ask me about IRE a lot, and there are now new studies about it, which is great. Um, it absolutely worked for me. I've seen other people do it, and they do have recurrence, but people have recurrence with the traditional Whipple too. So I felt so lucky and blessed that it didn't come back. I feel like it was nothing short of a miracle. I do think it was sort of everything. It's never one thing, right? It was having an incredible team of doctors, having support like family, friends. I mean, everyone was amazing. I mean, people are amazing. You get to see the beauty in people, and I think that's the gift that you get. And I feel like now, like my boys have, I mean, they're now 19 and 21, and I feel like they have so much empathy, and they learn something, even though they were so young. I mean, they remember bits and pieces about it. And I think too, I mean, now knowing what I know about pancreatic cancer, the survival rates have definitely increased. They're not nearly enough, but I I know, I mean, I had a 1% chance of surviving, but I used to always think like someone has got to be in that 1%. Why can't it be me? I always suggested people to go to an NCI designated hospital or ones around some kind of educational, like a by with a university, because they typically know the best. So now actually in the guidelines to do genetic testing. Back then it was really not so much, but the fact that I did go to NCI designated hospital, that was going to be a given that they were doing that. My sister also had breast cancer 10 years prior. We're 11 years apart. Um, and so it turns out like that I am BRCA2 positive, which is a genetic mutation. So it's basically like the simplest way to explain it is that we have genes and they're supposed to fight away any, because everyone has cancer cells. So it's supposed to fight and block any cancer cells developing. In having a mutation, it's basically an error, like a mess up in those genes, and it can allow it to happen. It doesn't mean you're definitely going to get it, but it does allow it to happen. I mean, there's so much new research about it, but the the good thing about having genetic testing, and I would have never known that, but I did have my sister who was what I lovingly call as my navigate, because she was a nag and my advocate, and she would educate herself so much that going into every appointment, and she went with me every appointment, half the time they would ask her if she was a doctor, worked in oncology, something like that, and she'd be like, "No, I'm just her advocate." And I think that's important of the knowledge. The and the place I went is the ones that did the molecular testing. But now it's actually in the guidelines. No matter what stage someone is for pancreatic cancer, is to do the genetic testing and the molecular tumor testing, because it gives them a better chance of targeting it. There's so many more drugs out there, and it can target those specific ones. So having that gene is a blessing and a curse. That my doctor told me is what gave it to you, but it can be what helps it go away, because they know how to deal with it. I do think, like, when you go through something like that, you you do look at the world differently, for sure. And I think, like, I'm still very much like the same person. I mean, I would say I do have like lasting side effects, which are kind of more of a pain than anything else. My 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 pancreas, which your pancreas gives you insulin, it regulates your blood sugar, and it also helps you digest your food. Um, I My pancreas has basically stopped producing insulin, which my doctor told me that was probably going to happen because it had been atrophying because the tumor was so large. And so that's definitely a challenge that is not fun. I'm still navigating it. And I do think you have to be your best advocate for yourself. You have to educate yourself. You have to keep asking. And I think when you have questions to a doctor, I mean, and a lot of times we will talk over your head a little bit sometimes. So sometimes if you don't understand the medical terminology, I would say is like, tell me, explain it to me like I'm an 8-year-old, and that could help. Um, I think I think my biggest, like, it's like my own personal challenge, is that I think the hardest thing is seeing way too many people die of this disease. If you were diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, I would tell you this. I mean, yes, statistics are horrible. I would say make sure you're seeing the best doctor possible. Go to an NCI designated hospital, get second, third, fourth opinions, whatever you need. You have to find that doctor willing to fight for you, because to me, there's so many doctors out there, general oncologists, even GI specialist oncologists, they don't know everything. And even, I would tell you this, I even went to a couple NCI designated hospitals, and it's always about the doctors, not necessarily the hospital per se. So go with your gut, and I would find that doctor willing to fight for you. It doesn't have to be a death sentence. And I feel that, so many times we've been brought up to trust our doctors, for sure, and not really question them. And I think, especially older people, I think older people, like, oh, the doctor told me I've got this much left to live. And what happens? They live until that time, right? I think there's a mental thing about it. I think so many things. I always tell people, number one, you got to figure out your why. Why do I want to live? Because I knew mine was pretty easy. I had my family. Two, I think that you got to find the best doctor possible, and find the doctor. You may have to go and see 3 or 4 different doctors. Never give up on hope. I remember in business, it's always like hope is not a plan, but hope is a plan when it comes to cancer. And just remember this, my doctor told me this. His name is Dr. Gregory Springett, and he's retired now, and he's the best doctor ever. But he told me this, that you are a statistic of one. No one is like you. No one's like your body. Anything is possible. And I think that resonated with me. And I think also, when you go through this, you cannot, you can't go through it without faith, to me. I mean, you probably can, but for me, faith was something that really held me through all of it. And I don't believe it's like, well, you know, are you religious or going to church or whatever? For me, it was very much like it was a personal relationship that I have with God. And I felt like God carried me through it, just kept putting people in my life that needed to be in my life. And I just felt like hope definitely trumps fear. So hope is just, you got to have it. And I think, you know, you sort of like, when you get diagnosed, you just kind of have to make that decision. Like, I'm ready for this fight. I'm ready to do this. And I think anything's possible.